The Canadian economy, already contending with inflation, tariffs, and a cost of living crisis, is also watching a steady and ongoing slump in the housing market.
Runaway home prices are bad for young Canadians, so we should tax the wealth gains of existing homeowners to rebalance the scales.
Canada is exploding after shocking plans surfaced that could steal your home equity and rip away the financial security millions of homeowners spent their entire lives building.
What's being discussed could mean seniors forced out of their homes that they've lived in for decades. For many Canadians, this feels like a direct threat to the one thing they believe was safe, their home.
There are whispers that the government is coming for your nest egg to pay off their massive debt.
Something strange has started happening in Canada's housing conversation, and if you're a homeowner, it probably hits close to home.
For years, you were told one simple thing. The equity inside your home, it's yours. You worked for it, you paid the mortgage, you paid the property taxes, you maintained the property. And when the value of your home went up, that increase was supposed to belong to you.
Here's what we're covering today. The federal government is implementing something called the Residential Property Equity Assessment, or RPEA for short. It's a brand new initiative. It could be a brand new federal tax on your home equity starting now in 2026. Now, this matters because it's not based on your property value. It's based on your...
For millions of Canadians, that belief became the entire retirement plan, not stocks, not pensions, the house.
You live in it for decades, pay it off, and one day that equity becomes your safety net. Maybe it helps fund retirement.
Maybe it becomes an inheritance for your kids. Either way, it's yours. And now that idea is being flipped on its head.
The difference between what you paid for your home and what your home is worth today. And that's money that just exists on paper until you really sell. But they still want to tax that.
Across Canada, people are starting to realize that the equity sitting inside their homes is being talked about in a completely different way.
But as something that the government could potentially tax, and that realization is making a lot of people uncomfortable.
I think there are a variety of trends going on. There's a stronger recovery one sees in terms of prices in eastern parts of Canada. But then in places like Ontario, especially Toronto, and to the very west in Vancouver or British Columbia, you see a bit of struggle in the markets in their march towards recovery.
In cities like Toronto and Vancouver, $1 million isn't luxury housing. It's normal housing.
It's townhouses. It's older family homes. In some neighborhoods, even modest properties cross that line simply because housing prices have exploded over the past 2 decades.
Now, what exactly did they propose to help solve this issue? So let's look at this tax structure. Looking at the numbers directly from the report's modeling tables, they didn't just say tax homes, they actually gave a specific formula.
So suddenly that tax threshold doesn't just capture the ultra-rich, it captures ordinary homeowners. And once you realize that, the entire conversation changes. The first $1 million of your home's value stays untouched.
They propose an annual progressive surtax on homes valued over $1 million. Now, it's important to note the nuisance here. The report doesn't say it's a tax on the full home's value. It's a surtax on the excess value above the 1 million threshold. That's important to remember.
But once your property goes above that line, the surtax begins.
Between $1 million and $1.5 million, the rate would be about 0.2% per year. Between $1.5 and $2 million, it jumps to 0.5%. And if your home is worth more than $2 million,
the rate moves up to 1% annually.
Now, on values between 1 million and 1.5 million, a tax rate would be 0.2%. And then values between 1.5 to 2 million, a tax rate of 0.5% would apply. And any value over 2 million, a tax rate of 1% would apply thereafter.
At first glance, those percentages look tiny, maybe even easy to shrug off. But let's actually look at them and apply them to real housing prices, because then the numbers will start to feel very different.
Under this proposal, the first 1 million is exempt and you pay nothing on that, but you pay 0.2% on the remaining 200,000. That works out to about $400 a year. You might say, okay, I can afford $400. That's about $33 a month. It's annoying, I know, but it's not going to bankrupt you. But remember, this is an annual tax. It doesn't happen once, it happens every single year.
If you own a $1.2 million townhouse,
you'd be paying around $400 a year. If your home sits closer to $1.8 million, that bill roughly jumps to $2,500 every year. If you happen to live in a property valued around $2.5 million, which is not unusual in major cities anymore,
the annual tax could climb to $8,500 or even $9,000. And here's the part that really makes homeowners pause.
You might think 0.2%, that's nothing. That's a rounding error, who cares? That is a psychological trick of small percentages. It sounds harmless, but when you look at the heavy inflated prices in BC and Ontario, it actually hurts a lot more.
This isn't a one-time charge. It happens every year. Now think about the situation many longtime homeowners are actually in.
Maybe you bought your house decades ago for $200,000 or $300,000. Back then, it was just normal middle-class home. Nothing fancy. But over the years, the neighborhood grew, the city expanded, housing demand exploded. Today, that same home might be worth $2 million.
On paper, that looks like you're incredibly wealthy. But in reality, maybe you're retired. Maybe your income comes from CPP or OAS. Maybe you're living comfortably, but not extravagantly.
Most homeowners think that the primary residence, the home that they live in, is safe from federal taxation in Canada. But that assumption has just been shattered. And if you don't understand what's actually coming, you could be facing a tax bill you've never really budgeted for.
That's the classic Canadian situation people talk about all the time. House rich, cash poor. Now let's talk about what this actually looks like when you run the numbers. Because once you move away from the policy language and look at real homes, things get interesting very quickly. Take a pretty normal townhouse in a big Canadian city. Nothing crazy. No indoor pool, no marble staircase, just a standard place where any family could live. In today's market, that townhouse could easily be worth about $1.2 million. And yes, that number sounds ridiculous, but that is the reality in places like Toronto or Vancouver. Under the proposed system, the first $1 million of your home's value is untouched. No tax there. But the remaining $200,000 above that line becomes part of that surtax calculation. At first glance, that doesn't really look terrifying. It's $400. That's about the cost of a couple of grocery runs these days. Or maybe even one. But here's where things start to escalate. Now the math starts to bite. Here's how this one breaks down. 0.2% on the first $500,000 above $1 million equals $1,000. Then it's 0.5% on the next $300,000 equals $1,500. Added up, that's roughly $20,500 a year. $20,500 a year, that's over $200 a month. For a working couple, maybe that's manageable. But for a senior on a fixed income, that $2,500 is a significant chunk of their old age security. Move up just one step in the housing ladder. Instead of a townhouse, now you're in a detached family home worth around $1.8 million. Again, that doesn't mean luxury anymore. In many parts of the country, that's just a normal 4-bedroom home with a garage and a small backyard. Now, the surtax calculation changes. Part of your home falls into the 0.2% bracket, and the rest falls into the 0.5% bracket. But here's what's really interesting. Many of the people living in those homes never thought of themselves as wealthy at all. They bought their houses 30 or 40 years ago when prices were completely different. A lot of seniors in Canada rely on CPP and OAS, which are stable but modest income sources. These programs were never designed to handle massive housing inflation. Meanwhile, property values keep climbing, and so do municipal property taxes. Maybe you bought 40 years ago for $200,000, and today the house is assessed at $2.5 million because you're in a prime location. This puts you in the top bracket. You're now hit with that 1% surcharge on the top end. So if you run the full calculation, you're looking at a tax bill of roughly $8,500 to $9,000 a year. Every year, the city reassesses the value of the property. Every year, the tax bill creeps higher. So you end up with this strange situation where someone might be living in a $2 million house, but their monthly income looks closer to a middle-class salary. That's the famous phrase Canadians hear all the time. House rich, cash poor. Now add a multi-thousand surtax into the equation, and suddenly things look different. Policymakers obviously realized how explosive this situation could become. Forcing retirees to suddenly pay thousands of dollars a year on homes that they've lived in for decades would cause a pretty big political earthquake. So they introduced what they call a solution. It's called tax deferral. So the authors came up with a workaround. And this is where the report gets even darker. They call it deferral. Maria doesn't have to pay today, so she doesn't have to write a check. She gets to stay in her home. Sounds compassionate. Here's what actually happens. Every year that $9,000 isn't forgiven, it's recorded and attached to her property title. Don't worry, Maria, they say. We'll collect it later. But that's not a favor. It's actually a loan, and loans, as we all know, come with interest, tax on tax. At first, it sounds very generous. Instead of paying the surtax immediately, seniors could delay the payment. No need to write a check right now. No need to panic about monthly budgets. But here's the catch. The tax doesn't disappear. It simply gets recorded against the property. Think of it like a growing tab attached to the home itself. Every year, that unpaid amount stacks up. And like most financial obligations, it comes with interest. If this sounds familiar to Americans, it's because it is. So the bill slowly grows in the background. Let's say someone owns a home valued high enough to trigger that $9,000 per year surtax. If they defer that amount annually, after 10 years, they're already sitting at $90,000. And that's before interest even enters the picture. Stretch that timeline to 20 years, and now the numbers are getting even more uncomfortable. You're looking at $180,000 in unpaid taxes. Now tack on compounding interest, and suddenly the balance will climb toward $250,000 or even more. Eventually, the bill has to be settled, usually when a home is sold or passed down to the next generation. And when her children go to settle the estate, the government is first in line, before the family, before the grandkids, and before anyone else. They call this a deferral mechanism. Let me translate that. It kind of looks like a slow-motion inheritance tax. That's when the government collects its portion first before the inheritance is divided and before the kids see the proceeds. So what started as a small annual surtax quietly transforms into something much larger, a slow claim on generational wealth. And here's the thing many people forget. Seniors are already dealing with a lot of financial pressure even before any surtax enters the conversation. Property assessments keep rising in major cities. Municipal taxes follow right behind them. Pension benefits like CPP and OAS don't always keep up with those increases. On top of that, some cities have introduced new rules requiring homeowners to submit vacancy or property use declarations, miss that paperwork deadline, and suddenly there are penalties attached. So how does she pay this? There's only one way. She sells the house. And no government on earth wants to be responsible for that. Grandmothers forced out of homes by new tax. That's political suicide. For someone juggling retirement paperwork, healthcare appointments, and day-to-day life, those rules can easily slip through the cracks. And when they do, the financial consequences can hit surprisingly hard. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Long before any surtax conversation started, many homeowners, especially seniors, were already dealing with people trying to get their hands on their home equity. Once a house climbs into that $1 million range, it becomes a very attractive target. You start seeing aggressive offers for private mortgages promising quick cash. The report estimates this surtax would generate between $4.5 billion to $5.8 billion every single year. And when you follow the money, you find more answers. Because the sales pitch behind this, according to the report, is that the money would be used to build affordable housing for young people. The pitch is simple. Tap into your home's value and solve your financial problems today. But those loans often come with brutal interest rates. Then there are renovation financing schemes where a simple home upgrade suddenly turns into massive debt. Even worse, cases of title fraud and mortgage fraud have been reported where criminals try to claim ownership of valuable homes. When your property is worth millions, your equity becomes something people want a piece of. Therefore, Ottawa went quiet on these political changes. And when Ottawa goes quiet on politically charged files like this, usually something big is coming. Now layer that reality onto the bigger financial incentive. According to the policy modeling behind this proposal, A home equity surtax could generate between $4.5 billion and $5.8 billion every year, and that's a huge number. Supporters say that money could help build affordable housing for younger Canadians. Critics say it could just as easily end up filling budget holes, and that's why this debate has exploded politically. For most Canadians, their home is their largest store of wealth. Touch it, and you're touching millions of voters. Now the country faces a difficult question. Should housing wealth be treated like taxable income or protected as retirement security? Whatever Canada chooses will shape the housing market for decades.